3-year-old Wamping never could have opened the door herself. So how did a kidnapper enter the family's flat? Through an open window? For the Dianmings, this day in November 2009 marks the beginning of their worst nightmare.
I was always searching for my daughter. I didn't work for half a year. All I did was look for her. You can't even begin to imagine what it's like if you've never been through it. When my daughter disappeared, I couldn't think about anything else. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep.
Dianming He and his wife Li have traveled thousands of kilometers in search of their daughter. Since the kidnapping, they've distributed countless leaflets and flyers. Every year, more than 20,000 boys and girls in China fall victim to this crime.
After the kidnapping, we slept for only 2 or 3 hours a night. Because I was always thinking about her, I kept dreaming she came back and told us where she'd been and what she'd been doing. But whenever I awoke, she wasn't there. It still feels like a nightmare that's never going to end.
Little Wamping's brother can feel his parents suffering. 2 years after the kidnapping, they've received another tip that their daughter might have been spotted in southern China. Full of hope, Li packs her husband's bag for the journey.
Whenever I go outside, it's horrible. It's especially bad when I see parents with children our daughter's age. Then I imagine what it would be like if we were all still together.
My biggest concern is that she might be living as a beggar somewhere. If someone bought her who's taking good care of her, then maybe she's okay. But I'm worried someone might be sending her out to beg and not be giving her enough to eat and drink. Sometimes when I see girls her age, I think about how she'd be that big now, too. Whenever I see kids her age going to school, it reminds me that my child's still missing.
Every week, He and his wife demonstrate in Shanghai. Because the police hardly investigated the case, the family placed want ads on television and in newspapers. Dong Xiaodai is 32 years old. She was 10 when human traffickers kidnapped her and sold her to a peasant family in Fujian province. She had to work hard every day and was no longer allowed to go to school. She has not seen her real parents in 22 years.
I thought about my parents every night. During the day, I was too busy to. I had to work really hard, carrying water, planting peanuts. When the peanuts were ripe, then it was time for wheat. We carried home the harvest on our shoulders. We had to pull the plough ourselves. My real parents had an ox, but there were no oxes in Fujian.
Day still suffers greatly from the loss of her parents. Meanwhile, she has a daughter and son of her own. When she was 19, she married the father of her children. They moved far away from the place where Day had suffered so terribly. In the city of Zibo, they opened a small jewelry store in a backyard house. Day is doing everything possible to ensure her children enjoy a carefree childhood. They're the most important part of her life. Day's husband Weng helps her search for her parents. In Weng's village, many parents bought stolen children. Both his brothers married girls who had been kidnapped.
Where I come from, a marriage broker pairs off everyone. She was home for a few days over New Year's. We took a quick look at each other and that was it. It's not like in the city, where you fall in love for a few years first. We're much simpler.
We don't fall in love. Why should we?
You just meet briefly, that's it.
I missed my parents from the start. I missed them as soon as I was kidnapped and sold in this strange place.
But
I still don't know where this place is that I miss. I wanted to run away but didn't know where to go, and I didn't have any money either. I didn't have a chance. But now, with the internet, there are all kinds of new possibilities. I often dream about searching for my real parents. I'm about to reach home, but don't quite make it.
Shortly before departing for southern China, He checks the website of a self-help organization which published photographs of his kidnapped daughter. One of the organization's volunteers thinks she spotted a now 5-year-old girl in southern China. She sends her a photo of her.
The photo was taken about a month ago. An internet friend spotted the little girl in Fujian. She's the same age as my daughter, Wamping. She sent me an MMS. I think there's about a 90% chance it's her. The picture looks just like her.
Over the past 2 years, He and his wife have followed many false leads. Several swindlers tried to sell them information, which later proved to be unfounded. But because the new clue about the girl in a village in Fujian province is so concrete, He applied for DNA testing at the police. Shortly before his departure, he checks if the results have finally arrived.
More than a month has passed since the DNA testing, but still no results. I come from the countryside and know how the police and officials operate there. The senior officials give orders to their subordinates, but they just ignore them. It's already been so long, and I'm worried that everything's being held up. That's why I want to make some inquiries of my own.
In 2007, Bao Yang Zan founded the internet platform Baby Come Home in the northern Chinese city of Tonghua. The self-help organization is currently searching for 6,000 children throughout China. Bao Yan Zhang and her team have established a network of over 30,000 volunteers across the entire country. Baby Come Home has made a name for itself throughout China by solving some spectacular cases. Staff members collect and publish information and counsel victims, both desperate parents as well as kidnapping victims searching for their families. He's daughter Wamping's case has also landed on Bai Yan Zhang's desk. She has a new clue for her.
Hello, you're Wamping's father? I'm Ms. Zhang. Mr. Han is here right now. He told me about your case. He said your neighbor, who's originally from Sanming, moved out 2 days before your daughter Wamping disappeared. Lots of children are sold to Sanming. It's quite common there. If Wamping really couldn't open the door to the flat from the inside, then maybe your neighbor climbed in from outside and opened it. I think this could be a vital clue. Many parents are severely depressed. They miss their children so much that they develop psychological problems. Some even commit suicide. Others get divorced after losing their child because the stress becomes too much for them. Then there are those who search aimlessly and neglect everything else, including their parents and their children at home. They're obsessed with finding their child. They earn a bit of money and search until it runs out. Then they do some odd jobs for a couple thousand yuans and search some more. They race through life restlessly. Some search for 20 years or more and never give up.
Baby Come Home is also helping Day. Volunteers from her home region think they have located her birth parents. Full of hope, Day and her husband Wang travel over 1,000 kilometers to her strange and distant home.
I'm really grateful for the support. The helpers at Baby Come Home have done so much for me. I'm all stirred up inside and can hardly wait to see my parents again.
After 22 years of suffering and despair, Day's hopes may be fulfilled at last.
Day knew a lot of names and gave us lots of evidence. For us, she's a model case. Most victims are aware that they were kidnapped, but they were too young at the time to remember where they lived. Without knowing the exact location, it's really difficult to find anyone, but because Day remembers some distinguishing features, we're quite certain we've found her parents.
He takes the express train from Shanghai to southern China. It's his 6th journey in search of his daughter. This time he will travel 1,000 kilometers. The long journeys have eaten up all his savings. Without his family's support, he would have been broke long ago. He must be cautious in this unfamiliar area. For generations, Fujian province on China's southeastern coast has been notorious for smuggling, including child trafficking. The police here are almost completely powerless.
Most kidnapped children from all around China are now being sold to Fujian. The people there have sealed themselves off from the rest of the country and resist all inquiries. They're different than in other provinces. Everyone in the village has the same family name. They're a clan and stick together. Everyone covers for everyone else. In our parent group, there was a father whose child was kidnapped 17 years ago. Last year, he discovered that his child lived in a village in Fujian. He traveled there several times and investigated undercover. Twice he was chased by locals who nearly caught him. In the end, he could free his child only with the help of the police.
For her, railway stations are forbidding places. Far too often during the past 2 years, he has stood in places like this and handed out leaflets with a photo of his missing daughter. From Xiamen, a booming economic metropolis in southeast China, a driver will bring him to the countryside of Fujian province. There he will be met by the kindergarten teacher who gave him the tip. The next day they will travel together to the village where the girl lives who could be his daughter.
你好，问一下，你是张老师是吧？对。哎，你好，我是海南华明爸爸。侯先生。
She thinks she recognized her daughter in the kindergarten where she works. They're comparing recent photos of Wamping with older ones.
The nostrils look very similar.
I noticed that too. And the ears. The hair's the same. Was your daughter's hair like this too before you lost her?
Yes.
This was taken at home?
Yes, her older brother took the picture of her.
How old is she in this picture?
It's from around mid-March 2009. She disappeared a month later.
Your daughter was 3 when she was kidnapped. Now she's 5. She won't recognize you immediately. You should take a really close look at her. Which parts of her body are similar? Which features are the same? I think that's the best way to do it.
You're right. A 3-year-old's memory isn't that good yet.
Baby Come Home has organized a welcoming committee for Day. Several volunteers will accompany her from here on in. Day is nervous. She feels like a stranger in the city. The Jiangxi province capital, Nanchang, is some 1,000 kilometers from the place she was sold to. A nearby village is supposedly her home. Even though Day can't remember anything here, the food tastes familiar. It reminds her of her childhood.
My father's face is a bit longish, and he has a thick beard. My mother looks almost exactly like me.
Do you think you'd recognize them?
I can still remember my parents a bit. Even though it's been more than 20 years, I think I'd still recognize them. It's taking forever. I just want to be with my parents right now and throw my arms around them.
But first, Day has to go to police headquarters for a DNA test. On the way there, she recalls the happy times before her kidnapping.
In my imagination, the rice I ate as a kid tasted just like the rice here. When I ate rice as a kid, I used to take a large bowl over to a friend's house when I couldn't finish it. Sometimes I dumped it onto the street with my chopsticks on the way there.
Day is expected at police headquarters in Nanchang. Baby Come Home has alerted the media. They want to use Day's case to draw attention to child kidnappings throughout the land. 5 young police officers were able to locate Day's hometown. They investigated on their own time because their superiors didn't support their work. Because Day could remember so few details, it wasn't easy putting together the puzzle pieces.
Your family name is too common. Even when you restrict the search to the south, there are still too many people with this name. I searched too, but I couldn't come up with anything. There are just too many people with this name. Your memories match the climate in Jianyang Township. It can snow there in the winter, and the snow remains on the trees. That fits your description. Then there's the dialect. That's how we were able to slowly localize the area.
With the help of the internet, they were able to gather information from various regions. The police officers who investigated are volunteers for Baby Come Home. Day has to give an interview for national TV. She recalls how she was kidnapped 22 years ago. A couple on the street asked her if she would like to go to the zoo with them. Then they presumably mixed sleeping pills in their drinks and kidnapped her.
When did you suspect that something wasn't right?
As soon as we got to the family's house, I realized something was wrong. They said we were just going to the zoo. But we'd already been underway for a really long time. I knew I'd been sold.
Did the people who bought you tell you they weren't your parents?
I already knew that myself. They didn't need to tell me.
Has anyone ever told you how much you were sold for?
Back then, I heard people saying it was more than 2,000 yuan.
Do you still remember what your birth parents looked like?
Just a little.
You must have suffered a lot back then.
Yes, especially at night. I was always exhausted, but couldn't get to sleep. The media have given us a lot of support so far, but not enough, especially not TV. We'd like them to broadcast more missing ads. Up to now, they've reported on children who've been found, but we need more help finding children who are still missing. I hope the media use every means at their disposal to help find these children over the long run.
He and his helper are searching for the village where his daughter was believed to have been seen. They know the name of the village and the family, but not the address.
Last night I couldn't fall asleep until 4 o'clock, and I woke up again at 6. I could only sleep 2 hours. I dreamt about my daughter, how I'd meet her today. When I saw her, I went up to her and she cried, "Papa!" I was overjoyed. We hugged and cried the whole time.
Rural life in China is still very underdeveloped. Families here place great value on having offspring. Farmers still want to have a lot of children to help out in the fields and to take care of them when they grow old and weak. This is the tradition. But the government's one-child policy led to a shortage of offspring. This is why in some regions children are bought for manpower, as son and heir, or as a future wife for one's own children. About half of all kidnapping victims end up in Fujian, where the sense of right and wrong has traditionally been very underdeveloped. He and his helpers heard that the grandfather of the family who bought Wamping is the headmaster of this school.
The only address we have for the girl at our kindergarten is the Liuban Primary School. We don't have an exact address for the family, but most people here know them.
They asked the way to the house of the headmaster's family. There they discover that the old headmaster has retired, but his successor is able to help them.
How do you write his given name and his family name? His name's Chen Ping.
Strangers are viewed with suspicion. He must be very careful not to give himself away. The kindergarten teacher stays in the car, so no one will suspect her of tipping him off. After a while, He locates the family's house. We use a hidden camera and pass ourselves off as tourists. Suddenly, He sees two children watching TV in the living room. Could the one on the left be his daughter? He is extremely tense and uncertain.
Her face looks a bit round in this picture. They don't seem all that similar anymore.
That's the picture in front of the TV, right? I'd suggest the two of you look through it slowly, frame by frame. Shouldn't she be taller? And both her cowlicks are different than my daughter's. She's probably the girl you're looking for. We've got two options. We can think of some excuse for going inside, or we can wait until the afternoon and try again. The kids are watching TV right now. I'm worried they might take a nap after lunch. I was focused on her size and reaction. I don't have a strong feeling either way yet.
They decide to take another look that evening. Day tries to get her bearings. Will she recognize her village?
After 20 years, I'm finally returning to my hometown. If nothing's changed, I'm sure I'll recognize a thing or two. Not everything could have changed. I'm sure I'll recognize some things right away.
But everything has developed during the past 20 years. The village has turned into a city, and the ox carts have given way to heavy traffic.
The bridge there. And there's another bridge.
That's a new bridge. The old bridge is over there.
Oh, over there. It was moved? The old bridge had a path that led downwards.
Right, that's the one over there.
And look, there's the mountain.
Oh yeah, the mountain.
Day is bewildered. For years she has been dreaming of this moment. But now everything seems so unreal.
What was your life like? It must have been really hard for you. Did you get enough to eat?
The entire neighborhood gathers together to celebrate the return of the lost daughter. Her parents lead Day to the house where she grew up. Nothing remains except for the foundation walls. The family moved into a new house later on. They show her the family register with their names.
Day Du Yun, and this here is Day Shun Liang.
Lin Shuiying, I remember. That's Mama's name. Day Shun Liang is my older brother. It's written Day Dong Liang. I used to call him Day Shun Liang.
But his name's changed. We had it changed, and my name's Day Chang Day.
I remember.
Baby Come Home honors the young police officers for their dedication and hard work. Normally, the police do very little to catch child traffickers. Those they catch end up in prison, but the buyers get off free. In the villages, the code of silence still reigns.
There are so many criminals because most people just stand there and don't do anything. This old adage has been proven true over and over again. I've been with the police for 16 years and with the Criminal Investigation Department for the past 11. Many of the kidnappings I find out about could have been prevented, but people just look away and don't want to get involved. That's why the criminals can do as they please.
Her and his helper call on the girl's family once again. The timing is now better and the girl is approachable. Is this the little Wamping he used to read bedtime stories to? Her is still uncertain. He whispers the same terms of endearment he used to say.
I took a look at her feet. They're not very similar. Both of her little toes curve outwards, but our daughters are pretty straight. When we arrived, I was really hopeful. But now I'm just incredibly disappointed.
Her struggles to cope with the shock. He dreads calling his wife with the bad news. She was so full of hope when he left.
I visited the girl this afternoon. I won't be bringing home our darling daughter this time round. This girl had 2 cowlicks on her head. Wamping's got only 1. And she didn't have a scar on her left calf like our little girl does. And don't forget, don't say anything to my mother. It'll only make things worse. Okay, see you soon.
Her's mother had suffered a heart attack after Wamping's kidnapping 2 years ago. In Day's parents' village, the good news has quickly spread. Many people here know her father and remember how much he suffered back then. They prepare a banquet. The policemen who helped Day are invited as well. Day's father spent years searching for her. He wandered hundreds of kilometers up and down the land on foot.
I searched the land all around the mountain every day for almost 6 months, but I couldn't find her. Later on, I heard someone had been killed. I went there to look for her, but the people said, no, that's just a rumor. Nothing like that happened around here. So I went back home. About 2 years later, there was another crime. I went there to see what clothes the victim was wearing. The heart had even been removed. At least that's what everyone was saying. I looked for her everywhere, even in rain and snow. It was horrible. All I could do was think about my daughter, but I couldn't find her. It really hurt. I couldn't eat or sleep anymore. I looked like a ghost.
Everyone's happy to see Day again. In the morning, the couple who bought her back then called her on the phone.
They asked me, "Did you find them?" I said, "Yes, I'm home at last." Then they said, "Your parents must be overjoyed." And I said, "Yes." But then I told them how my father used up all the family's savings searching for me. He looked everywhere. In the end, he was totally emaciated and weighed less than 45 kilos. He was half human, half ghost. That's the way it was.
The guests arrive. Everyone's cheerful. For the first time in ages, Day is truly happy. Six weeks later, Day travels to Fujian province to visit the couple who bought her. She is now a different person than the Day we knew before. She's become a harmonious, self-confident young woman. She wants to bring the family something. The very family that bought little Day from human traffickers 22 years ago. For generations, children have been traded in this region. No one cares if it's a foundling, an orphan, or a kidnapped girl like Day. No one ever asks where the children come from. One of the two neighbors was also sold as a child. But that didn't stop her from buying a little girl herself several years ago, as the future wife of her son.
A girl you know and that you've raised makes a better daughter-in-law than a stranger. Strangers cause nothing but problems.
Day has heard dozens of such stories. Her in-laws also bought her two sisters-in-law as young girls. And the couple who bought Day bought another girl after her. These walls conceal a disturbing reality. Child kidnappings and human trafficking are systematically downplayed. For the couple who bought Day, child trafficking is nothing but a trivial offense. We can film here only because Day wanted us to. Her parents are clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Day's younger sister appears very distressed. She never found her real parents. Eventually, one of the sons agrees to be interviewed.
Day was carried around the village and offered for sale. My parents were afraid that if somebody else bought her, they might treat her badly. That's why my mother bought and raised her. In our family, everyone was treated equally. I was treated the same way she was. And everyone had to do the same amount of work. Did your sisters go to school? No, they didn't go to school. My parents couldn't afford it. The girls stayed at home and worked in the fields.
At last, Day's foster mother is willing to talk. But as she knows only the local language, Day translates for her.
You paid 2,000 yuan for Day. That was half a year's salary back then. How could you afford that? Wasn't it difficult for you?
He's asking if it was really hard for you to pay the money for me back then.
No, we wanted to have her.
That's the way many families thought about it. Even if they had many children, they wanted to have more, even if they were poor.
My oldest daughter had just married and left the house. That's why I wanted another girl.
The villagers are illiterate. Back then, they didn't know this was bad. If this family hadn't bought me, some other family would have. That's destiny.
But the law forbids it. If no one bought children, then no one would kidnap them.
That's true. Not as many children would be kidnapped. These days, more is being done to prevent it, but children are still getting kidnapped. And it's still a tragedy for families that lose a child.
Don't you feel any hatred toward your foster parents now?
No, not at all. They took me in and kept me. That was a good thing.
Most victims remain loyal to the parents who bought them. This is normal, according to buyer Yan Zhang from Baby Come Home. That's why it's so difficult to punish those who buy children. Hardly anyone ever presses charges, so the government rarely takes measures.
I really despise these people who buy children. I think they're incredibly selfish. When they buy a child, it's like cutting out a piece of the real parents' hearts. How can they do that to someone else? All that torment for so many years. I think these selfish buyers should be punished more severely. If the state doesn't punish them harder, then child trafficking will go on forever. We hope these children will someday realize it was a crime for their foster parents to buy them. We hope they make the right decision for themselves emotionally, but we can't get involved because the children also develop strong feelings for their foster parents.
A few days later, we meet her and Lee in a park in Shanghai. They're still very depressed that their search fell short once again. Lee had prepared everything for Wamping's return. She bought her new clothes and set up her bed. They've nearly forgotten what it's like to enjoy life without being plagued by constant sorrow. The couple cannot get over their grief for their missing daughter.
I was terribly disappointed when I heard over the phone that it wasn't our daughter. But we're not giving up. We're going to keep on searching. After the phone call, I just sat there in disbelief. The photo looked so much like her. How could we have been so wrong?
Ever since my return from Fujian, our longings for our daughter have been unbearable. Right before my trip, we sorted through her things and arranged her clothes. We aired them out, especially the ones that are big enough to still fit her. Then there's the jumper my wife knitted for her. She could still probably wear that. We got everything ready because we were expecting her.
I despise everyone who buys children. They know it's against the law. They've seen the TV reports. Everyone knows, but they still buy them.
The human traffickers get up to 8,000 euros per child. It's easy money.
They should all be sentenced. If the buyers are jailed for only 10 days, then there will always be new buyers and sellers. But if they were penalized more severely, word would quickly get around that it's a crime. Then no one would buy a child anymore.
Her and Lee's search continues. Because the police are not investigating the case, they have no other choice but to do it on their own. Time is of the essence. The more years that go by, the more difficult it will be for Wamping to remember her parents.